It all started about a month ago, right around the time my mother passed away. It's honestly hard to put into words how devastating that was for me. My wife, Lisa, and I had been together for 8 years, and I thought we were solid. We had our ups and downs, but I believed in us. When Mom died, I threw myself into the funeral arrangements, trying to hold it together. Lisa was there, but I started noticing little things. She was colder than usual, distracted, and seemed to avoid being alone with me. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just overwhelmed and grieving in her own way. But then, some weird stuff started happening. She'd leave her phone around more often, but when I'd try to look at it, she'd instantly get defensive and change the subject. I remember one night she left her phone on the kitchen table and I saw a text notification pop up. It was from someone named Mike, not a common name in our circle, and the message was just a quick, "Can't wait to see you tonight." I froze. I felt my stomach drop. I looked at her face when she came into the room and she caught me staring. She gave me that bitchy little smile she always does when she knows she's hiding something, and she brushed past me, acting like it was nothing. I decided not to say anything then. I figured maybe I was imagining it. But then I noticed she was deleting messages, clearing her call log, and suddenly she started being busy whenever I tried to check her phone or ask her questions. She'd make up stories about work stuff, or say she was out with friends when I'd call her during odd hours. It was like some part of my gut told me I was right, but I didn't want to face it. I wanted to trust her, but everything was adding up. What really got me was the timing. The day of my mother's funeral, I was really struggling, and Lisa was supposed to be there for me. Instead, she was distant, texting all day long. I found out later she was supposedly comforting her sister, but I had this sinking feeling. That night, she said she needed to get some rest, and she left the house early in the morning the next day to run errands. I was too exhausted and grief-stricken to think much of it at the time. But then I started noticing she kept disappearing for hours, and her stories about where she was going didn't add up. One evening, I decided to check her social media accounts. I'd always trusted her, but I needed certainty. Sure enough, I found a bunch of messages from Mike, pics of them together at a restaurant, flirty comments, and even some supposed private photos she'd posted that I'd never seen before. She hidden all of that from me. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. How long had this been going on? How many lies had I been fed? I couldn't believe it. My wife, Lisa, had been cheating on me with my best friend, Mike, during perhaps the worst time of my life, my mother's funeral. I was furious. I wanted to confront her, but I also knew I needed a plan. I couldn't just blow up at her without evidence. I started digging around her stuff, checking messages, looking at her phone when she wasn't paying attention. I was so angry, but also crushed. How could she do this? How could she betray me and then lie about it? The worst part was knowing that she'd been lying all along, playing the innocent wife, while she was out screwing my best friend and pretending to care. So I sat there staring at those messages late into the night, feeling this intense mixture of betrayal, heartbreak, and rage. I knew I couldn't let her get away with this, not without some kind of comeuppance. I needed to decide what to do next, but I knew one thing: my life was never going to be the same after this. The next day I was a mess. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I kept thinking about was the betrayal, how she looked me in the eyes and lied so effortlessly. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut over and over again. I kept replaying everything I saw, those messages, the photos, her sneaky little smile when she caught me looking. It was like some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I had to confront her, I knew that much, but I also knew it had to be done carefully with a plan. That afternoon, I decided I'd wait until she got home. I wanted her to face me to see how deeply I'd been hurt. She came in acting normal, like nothing was wrong, wearing her usual bitchy smirk, pretending she had no idea what I knew. I kept quiet for a while, just watching her. The silence was deafening. I could see her playing her little games, acting like she was innocent, like I was the crazy one. Then I finally broke. I asked her straight out, "Lisa, who is Mike? And what the hell is going on?" Her eyes flickered for a second as if she was surprised I knew, but then she quickly regained her composure. "What are you talking about? You're imagining things. I don't know any Mike." She lied smoothly, her voice dripping with that condescending tone she always uses when she's lying. I told her I had seen the messages, the photos, and I wasn't stupid. I told her I knew she'd been cheating on me during the worst week of my life, my mother's funeral. That's when she started to get really bitchy. Oh, please. So what if I was talking to someone? It's none of your business. You're just jealous or insecure. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Her words hit me like a slap. How could she be so cold, so dismissive? I told her that I wasn't about to sit around and be lied to anymore, that I deserved the truth, and if she wanted to keep playing her games, I'd be the one to end it. She rolled her eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I was just stressed because of my mom's death. She said she was just talking to Mike to comfort him, because he was upset about the funeral too. I didn't buy it. Nothing about her stories added up. I could see the smirk on her face like she thought she was winning. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I told her I wanted her out of the house, at least for a little while, so I could think. She laughed and told me I was overreacting, that she'd never cheat on me, and that I was just projecting my grief and pain onto her. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying all along, and now I had proof. I was angry, yes, but also devastated. How had I missed all the signs? How did my wife, the woman I loved, betray me like this, especially during such a dark time? After she left, I sat there trying to process everything. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and so damn lonely. I reached out to a friend, told him everything. He told me I needed to think about what I wanted, whether I wanted to forgive her or just cut ties and move on. I didn't have an answer right then. All I knew was that I didn't want her in my life anymore, not after this. But the thing is, I wasn't just hurt, I was angry, furious, even. How dare she lie to my face, cheat on me with my best friend, and then act like I was the one in the wrong? That was the beginning of my plan for revenge. I wanted her to feel what I felt, that betrayal, that heartbreak, that crushing sense of being used and discarded. I wasn't going to let her get away with it without paying some kind of price. So I started thinking about how to do it, how to make her regret what she did. I knew I had to be careful, but I also needed her to see that I was not the fool she thought I was. This wasn't just about ending things. It was about making sure she knew exactly how much she'd hurt me. That's when I realized I'd need to gather a little more evidence, maybe even turn the tables, see how she liked being caught off guard. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. Not this time. Over the next few days, I kept my cool on the outside, but inside I was boiling. I kept digging, checking her social media, her phone, even subtly following her when she left the house. I needed to be sure, to have everything in place before I made my move. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. She was good at hiding things, but I was catching her slip, little texts she forgot to delete, a conversation she had during a supposed work trip, pictures with Mike that she never wanted me to see. One day, I found a chat log from her email account. She'd been exchanging explicit messages with Mike for months. Not just innocent flirting, but full-on sex talk. She lied about everything. She said she was just comforting him, but the truth was they'd been seeing each other behind my back for a long time. I felt like I'd been punched again, only this time it was worse because I had concrete proof. I also found out they met up a handful of times, always when she claimed she was out with friends, always hiding her phone from me. That was the moment I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I was ready. I wanted to catch her in a lie, expose her for the manipulative bitch she really was. I set up a camera in the living room, nothing obvious, just a little device I bought online. I wanted her to slip up and show her true colors when she thought I wasn't watching. That night, she came home late, smelling of perfume I didn't recognize, obviously trying to hide her scent. I watched as she sat in the living room, texting furiously, her phone constantly vibrating. Suddenly, she got up and went to the bathroom, leaving her phone on the couch. I grabbed it without noticing. My heart was pounding as I saw messages pop up. There they were, more explicit sexts, plans to meet up again. I felt a strange mixture of rage and sadness. She was really doing this. During the confrontation last time, I thought I was just imagining things, but now I had proof, hard, undeniable proof. I waited until she was asleep, and then I went into our bedroom. With trembling hands, I took her phone and started going through her apps, her texts, her deleted messages. I deleted some of her secret chats, just enough so she wouldn't suspect I'd caught everything. I wanted her to think I was still clueless, but I was carefully gathering evidence to use at the right moment. I wanted her to see that I knew everything, every lie, every betrayal. The next morning, I woke up early, planning my next move. I knew I couldn't just accuse her outright anymore. I needed to create a situation where she'd slip up again, so I could catch her in the act or get her to confess. I started dropping hints, acting distant, pretending I was suspicious. She picked up on it right away, of course, but she played it cool like she had nothing to hide. That only made me angrier. Throughout all this, I was also fighting my own emotional chaos. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and disgusted by her bitchy attitude, trying to gaslight me, deny everything, and make me the bad guy. She was so good at lying, so good at manipulating, but I refused to be played anymore. I had enough proof now, and I was ready to expose her for what she really was. The plan was simple but calculated. I was going to catch her red-handed, or she'd slip up and admit everything herself. Either way, I'd have her cornered. I wanted her to know I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I was done being the one betrayed and humiliated. I was going to make sure she felt exactly what I was feeling: devastation, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. It was the beginning of my revenge, and I was determined to see it through. The day I decided to finally confront her came unexpectedly. I'd been planning it for days, waiting for her to make a mistake or say something incriminating. I knew she was feeling the pressure, so I dialed up the emotional intensity. I started acting colder, more distant, dropping little hints that I knew everything and that I was done playing her games. She noticed, of course, and her bitchy attitude only intensified. She tried to push me to talk, to admit I was overreacting, but I kept my cool, waiting for her to slip up again. That night, I arranged for her to be alone at the house. I told her I needed to talk, that I'd finally had enough of the lies. She looked at me with that smug expression, like she was already winning, like she thought she'd get away scot-free. I fed her some bullshit about needing closure, but what I really wanted was for her to make a mistake, to give herself away. When she sat down across from me, I looked her in the eyes and asked, "Lisa, who is Mike, and how long has this been going on?" She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "You're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. You're just jealous, insecure, and grieving. That's all this is." I could see her trying to play the victim, but I was buying it. I had enough evidence now. I pulled out her phone, the one I had secretly been monitoring, and showed her the explicit messages, the photos, the plans to meet up. Her face froze for a second, then she scoffed again, trying to brush it off. "That's not what it looks like," she said, but her voice was trembling. Her eyes darted around, and I saw the first crack in her facade. She was panicked. I could tell she was trying to come up with some bullshit excuse, but I was already done listening. I told her I knew she'd been lying, that I'd seen everything, and that I wasn't going to pretend anymore. Her response was to get defensive, to call me crazy, to say I was making everything up because I couldn't handle my mother's death. "You're just upset and you're taking it out on me," she spat. But I wasn't going to let her spin this anymore. I told her I was tired of the lies, tired of her bullshit, and that I wanted her out of the house immediately. She stood up, smirked again, and told me I was overreacting, that I was just jealous and paranoid. Then she tried to gaslight me, saying she'd never cheat, that I was imagining things because I was grieving. I looked at her and realized how deep her manipulations went. For a moment, I was just stunned. How could she be so cold, so heartless? How could she betray me during the worst week of my life and then lie about it like it was nothing? I told her she could leave, that I'd call someone to help her pack, and that I didn't want to see her face again. She stormed out, muttering insults, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had done what I needed to do. I'd caught her, exposed her, and finally taken back some control. But the pain was real, and I knew it would take a long time to heal from this. That night, I sat alone, staring at the mess of my life. I thought about everything: the lies, the betrayal, the fact that my wife and my best friend had both betrayed me during my most vulnerable time. It was a lot to process. I realized I was angry, but I also felt an odd sense of clarity. I needed to move on, to rebuild myself. I started making decisions: how to divide our assets, what to do about the house, and how to start healing. I've learned that sometimes the people you trust the most can turn out to be the biggest enemies. That betrayal cuts deeper than I ever thought possible. But I also learned I was stronger than I thought. I could survive this, even if it felt like my world was crumbling. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I will never let anyone treat me like that again. And if there's one thing I want others to learn from my story, it's this. Trust is fragile, but your dignity and self-respect are worth fighting for, even when everything else seems lost. After she finally left, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted, but the aftermath was just beginning. I stayed up all night, staring at the empty house, trying to process what had just happened. I kept thinking about the whole setup, how she had lied so effortlessly, how she'd betrayed me during my mother's funeral, how my best friend Mike had become part of this nightmare. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't let her get away with it, not without consequences. The first thing I did was cut ties with Mike. I blocked him everywhere, phone, social media, everything. I didn't want him in my life anymore, not after what he did. That piece of trash had no remorse, no respect. And Lisa, she was the real piece of work. I knew I couldn't just forgive and forget, not after everything she'd done. I needed to take control in some way to make her feel the pain she'd inflicted on me. So I started planning my revenge in a strategic way. I didn't want to lash out recklessly. No, I needed her to see the full extent of her lies and manipulations. I decided to confront her one last time, not to beg for answers, but to get the satisfaction of watching her squirm. I wanted her to realize that she had lost everything: her marriage, her reputation, maybe even her respect for herself. It was going to be brutal, but it was necessary. I also knew that I had to rebuild myself, to focus on healing. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the heartbreak and the anger. I stopped obsessing over her, and I forced myself to think about what I deserved: someone who wouldn't play games, someone who wouldn't cheat during my darkest hours. I realized I needed to focus on my own well-being first. No more codependence, no more putting her needs above mine. This was about reclaiming my life. In the meantime, I also made some concrete decisions. I hired a lawyer about the house, started looking into splitting our assets. I didn't want to be dragged down by her anymore. I also blocked her from all my social media, and I deleted pictures of us together. I knew I'd have to face some awkward legal battles, but honestly, I didn't care. She'd already shown me what she was capable of. Why should I hold on to anything that reminded me of her? One of the hardest parts was telling my family. They couldn't believe it at first. My dad was angry, my sister was devastated, and some of my close friends couldn't hide their disgust. It was embarrassing, honestly, but I knew I had to be honest, even if it hurt. It helped me feel a little less alone, knowing I wasn't the only one who saw her for what she really was. Now I'm at a point where I'm trying to put the pieces back together. I've blocked her number, deleted all her social media, and I'm focusing on myself. I don't hate her, I just feel sorry for her, honestly. She's a manipulative, bitchy woman who thought she could get away with everything. But I know I'll come out of this stronger. I've learned a lot about trust, betrayal, and what I need to be happy. Ultimately, I think the biggest lesson I've taken from all this is that people reveal their true colors when you're at your lowest. If I could give anyone advice, it's this: protect yourself, trust your instincts, and don't let anyone treat you like a fool. Because, in the end, the pain of betrayal is brutal, but the strength you gain from surviving it is even more powerful. I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I'm going to rebuild my life, better, stronger, and wiser than before. Looking back now, I realize that the worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, but how it shattered my sense of trust, not just in Lisa, but in everyone around me. I used to believe that love and loyalty meant everything. Now, I see how fragile those things can be when someone's really determined to lie and manipulate. The pain of discovering she cheated during my mother's funeral, of seeing her lie so effortlessly, is something I'll carry with me forever. That day, everything changed. But I also learned something crucial: how to pick myself up after falling so hard. I learned that revenge isn't about petty payback, but about reclaiming your dignity and taking control of your life again. I stopped waiting for her to come back or to give me some kind of closure. I decided that my happiness was more important than any apology or explanation she might give. She lost her right to be part of my life because of her actions. I'm the one who gets to decide whether I move on, and I've made that choice. I've started focusing on myself, getting healthier, reconnecting with friends I'd lost touch with, and finding new hobbies. I won't lie, some days are still tough. The betrayal runs deep, and I sometimes catch myself thinking about the pain she caused. But mostly, I'm proud of how far I've come. I look in the mirror and see someone who's been through hell and come out stronger on the other side. That's what matters now. For anyone reading this who's going through something similar, I want you to know that you're not alone. Trust is fragile, but so is your self-worth. Don't let someone's lies define you. When you catch them, don't just get angry. Use that anger to propel yourself forward. Reclaim your power. Your life doesn't stop because someone betrayed you. It begins again, even better than before. Finally, I've learned that forgiveness isn't always about the other person. Sometimes, it's about forgiving yourself for trusting too much or for staying too long. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means choosing to move past it and not let it destroy you. I'll never forget what Lisa and Mike did, but I refuse to let their actions ruin my future. So here I am, a little battered but still standing. I know I'll eventually find someone who deserves my trust, someone who values honesty and respect. Until then, I'll keep rebuilding, stronger, wiser, and more cautious, because in the end, all you have is yourself, and I'm finally proud to say that I am enough.